What's up, my Yu-Gi Bros? I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. It's Thursday. Let's do some theory. Today, I want to talk about something that you all may have noticed in the context of something that you all might not have noticed that will be useful in deck building in the future, in preparing for future formats and things like that. And the thing that you may have noticed is that artifacts are suddenly weirdly good this format. There is a use for artifacts for basically every deck that exists right now. Against ABC, you can use Moraltalk to hit its Tsukiyomi or stop the play entirely by hitting a Scythe button. Against BA, Scythe will stop them from doing anything useful. Against Blue Eyes, you can either hit the alternative dragon or the tuner with a Moraltalk, or if they go for the Soul Charge play, you can actually block out their best play with Soul Charge by using Scythe to stop them from going into the extra deck. It's a pretty amazing engine for this format. And the reason is because of something you may not have noticed, which is the difference in disruption techniques. When you are trying to block out an opponent's strategy, you have to disrupt them somehow, and there are kind of two ways that you can do that. You can block an entire mechanic or an entire action with a card, or you can destroy or banish or just remove a key combo piece. These two things can be compatible, but they frequently aren't, and the reason why that's important is because there are decks against which the destruction, the hitting the key card, the spot removal thing, does not help very much, and there are decks against which the blocking out doesn't help very much, and I call the difference micro disruption versus macro disruption. A deck that loses to micro disruption, if it loses its combo piece, it has to stop for the turn. But a lot of micro disruption based decks tend to be slow enough or tend to have the ability to compensate enough for a macro disruption strategy that if you use a macro disruption strategy, you're actually going to find yourself wasting a resource and they're going to wait for a turn. For instance, if you were to try and use a macro disruption technique like an artifact Scythe against something like, for instance, Hat, in order to stop them from going into an Xyz with the Trap Tricks engine. If you were going to try and use your Sanctum to go into an artifact Scythe when they go for that, they're just going to stop for a turn and then they're going to blow you out of the water the next turn because the macro disruption does not stop them. However, against decks where macro disruption is good, if you try to use micro disruption, they tend to be able to play around it. They tend to be faster decks whose combos can compensate for losing something. And that's what brings us to artifacts being good this format, is the fact that this is a format where both micro disruption and macro disruption are important, and artifacts, specifically Moraltalk and Scythe, can do both of those things. In this format, you have instances where something like an artifact Scythe won't be helpful, for instance against Blue Eyes or against Mermail. However, if you use a micro disruption card, i.e. Moraltalk, then you can destroy a key card, for instance their Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon or their Abyss Megalo, and you stop them out for an entire turn. The opposite is true of BA. If you try to use a Moraltalk, their strategy will compensate for it. They will work right around that Moraltalk, but if you use a Scythe, they have to stop their combos for a turn, which is really, really important for stopping their strategy. Both of these things are true for ABC. If you hit one of their specific problem cards, then you can stop the whole strategy. If you use a macro blockout strategy, like an artifact Scythe, then you will be able to get a foothold into the game because they won't be able to put a Dragon Buster on the board. So that is something interesting that I noticed about artifacts and this format in particular that will be useful for you going into the future. If you are preparing for a format, it's very important to understand whether it is a better strategy to go for micro disruption or a better strategy to go for macro disruption, because you only, of course, have limited deck space, you only have limited side deck space, and if you use the wrong one against the wrong deck, you are going to find yourself in some major trouble. This will also help you in deciding what side deck cards will be good against a deck, because there are just tons of side deck cards that work for most decks. When you look at a particular deck, you're going to have a really long list of potential side deck cards, and if you think about what that deck is weak to, whether it is more weak to macro strategy or more weak to micro strategy, if it can get around one of the two of them better than the other, even if it's weak potentially to both of them, or if it's strong potentially to both of them, which one it can work around more, then you can have a better idea of what will work best in your side deck and what to get to prepare for something like Junie Shishi. Or for another future format that you are going to be needing to prepare against. So I thought that was an interesting thing to point out. I figured I would send it your way. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. And of course, subscribe for more decks, discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Thank you all for watching. I am your host, the one, the only, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.